Namaskara. So welcome to the last day of the second Sangam festival, the Ojas Sangam festival. In the first festival, we were focusing on text and technique. And this festival has been focusing on what is it to revisit and with more specifically contextualizing. So today we have the lovely performers who have actually shared their journey with Sangam through their performance pieces. We have actually had an early Navaratri of Sangam women through their 9 pieces. So let's see what is it that they experience. What was their journey through Sangam behind the scenes? What has it been like? So on this wonderful occasion of Navaratri, it's amazing to explore this emotions of a woman through the different shades, through these wonderful women gathered here. Thank you very much. And thanks to each one of you who have joined us today. Thank you. Let's start with Pratibha. So we pretty much will be going in the order in which you showcased your pieces. So Pratibha, what is your journey with Sangamuri?
Vanakkam. I have been learning Sangam for a few years now, mainly from Tirumati Vaidehi Herbert, and before that from my mother. It has been a lifelong quest in this treasure trove of poems. Right now, I'm at a stage where I think I'm good enough to understand Nachinar Kiniyar's Urai and all of that. So I'm going into Uraivendar's explanations of Sangam literature. So it's been beautiful, just taking one poem and exploring it completely with depth. In this particular piece that I chose because of 3 things. One is what Vaidehi says. Usually some people have always placed this stereotypical image that Sangam means you have to have a degree in Tamil in order to understand Sangam literature. And she says, no, that's not true. Sangam is for everybody. And one of my tasks with Iyakkam Dance Company, that's the reason why I named it Iyakkam Dance Company, is that we want to take Tamil literature to everybody, irrespective of caste, creed, religion, race, or color. The second thing is...
Pratibha, what is the meaning of Iyakkam?
Okay, Iyakkam has lots of meanings. It's an old Tamil word. Iyakkam means movement, if you want to take it very literally. It also could mean a political movement. It could mean a social movement. It could mean direction, because when we watch Tamil movies, they say kadai thirai kadai iyakkam, so it could mean directing something. It could also mean a musical movement. So it has lots of layers in it. So the reason I chose this particular piece is also because it's secular, like most Sangam poems, at least the earlier Sangam poems. And the third reason why I chose it is because it uses imagery that are not common in Bharatanatyam. Like, for example, a fisherwoman and a fisherwoman talking about their livelihood and their lifestyle. And she goes into so much detail about how they cut open the fat of the shark and lay it out for drying so that the birds come and peck at the flesh. Most Bharatanatyam dancers would kind of, sulichu their moham. They would go, ew, that does not sound good. And this is the main reason, one of the main reasons why I took it, because I want to turn it on its head and say, hey, this is also part of our lifestyle. This is a part of the Tamil lifestyle as well. In fact, so much that when we were choreographing this, my teacher and I was cutting fish like this, like how you would cut katrika. And she said, that's not how you cut fish. You cut fish along the scales like that. And I did not even know about it, because our lifestyles are so different from the people who are described in these poems and most of the common people in Tamil Nadu. So it was a really, really lovely experience doing this.
That's interesting, because what I hear is that just working with this one song inspires, if not anything else, just the idea of respecting people for who they are, and they are so different from us. And just because in our mind, they might be the other, it doesn't mean anything. We are as much the other for them. And in that sense, it's just about respecting all that is different and similar. And you are very right about this, because we did see this particular song as an example when we did Maypatiyal class with Raghuram sir way back last June. That was one of the early classes and introduction to Sangam that we saw. And I clearly remember when sir took this particular song, there was a response from one of us saying, "Ayyo, adellam panna mudiyadhu. Sir, neenga vera edavadhu edungome." I think as people, we are so used to trying to get into our comfort zone and what we are familiar with and, comfortable, that we don't want to go out of the boundary. And this clearly shows it's okay just because it's out of the boundary for us. It doesn't mean anything else, That's very nice. And I love the way you were talking about, the nuances and the layers, and you were speaking about just the one word, iyakkam. Because the reason is, it reminded me of actually our next speaker, who's Apurva. Apurva has been with us literally in this journey of Sangam from the time we started it. This has been a Corona baby, pretty much. We started the Ojas Sangam project and Corona happened. That's what happened. Both of this happened at the same time. So April, we started appreciating Tamil text. And from that day, Apurva has been someone we can fall back on. And it's very interesting, because in all who have performed till now, at least, of course, barring people like Priyaka, probably Apurva has done maximum Sangam poems within these festival performers. So one might think, having done so many poems, having worked with Priyaka so many times, having access to that kind of expertise, and, even Raghuram sir, often I have wondered, why should she sit in every single class like that? And it just reflects how much of focus and kind of, the sense of you need to soak it in. That's what I see when Apurva is sitting here, because that's one reason why I asked her to actually perform a song that she performed 2 years before. So what is it about going back? So thank you, Apurva, for bringing that other element, which is so important to all of us artists, that it's not about moving from one point to the other, but it's just about staying there and being in the moment and just taking it all in. So tell me, how has it made a difference to you, this entire journey?
Absolutely, Akka. I think, you really hit the nail on the head in the sense of, I think both of these things, one is Sangam literature in itself, and the effort of capturing, such a vast and beautiful anthology like Sangam into dance. These are both, these are journeys that you have to take. They cannot be one-offs. And of course, and that has been my biggest sort of realization and learning in these last few years. Like you said, I mean, it was a few years back that, my sort of dalliance with Sangam actually started, whether it was, reading on my own or, watching, a Sangam that has already been brought into Bharatanatyam, and then starting to sort of perform it myself. But I think this sort of, last 1.5 years of also immersing into both the aspect of literature, through the, the various activities of Ojas, and observing. So not just working myself, I think, on poems, bringing them into dance, but through both the first festival, watching the development of these pieces into dance has been, I think, one of my biggest learnings. Because, like Pratibha said very beautifully, there's, first of all, you're talking about, of course, imagery that is very new, that is very different, that needs to be captured with its flavor, yes. But the bigger challenge, and it's something that strikes you, is that you cannot have a go-to. You cannot say, okay, I've done padams, I've done javalis, I've done my margam items, and therefore I know how to choreograph, a Sangam poem that I take up. Because along with its own unique grammar, in the context of how the literature, the framework of the literature itself, I think it becomes imperative that we have to construct a grammar for these pieces within the dance as well. And I think that has come out of this journey of not just attempting pieces myself, but watching so many dancers, develop their pieces along the way. Because what we're trying to do ultimately is not to translate these poems into I mean, it's as good as giving a word-to-word meaning, if that's what we try to do in dance, but to really understand the world that they are creating and to see how that same world can be just touched upon through the, sort of the landscape that you're creating, the visual landscape that you're creating in dance. So I think that has been extremely fascinating, and there are no rules to this. That's another thing that I realized, right? You can't sit down and put down a set of 1 2 3 4, this is the grammar or this is the format, right? Like, and say do this after this and it will work. But the framework is sort of underlying. The rules are very sort of under the surface, and they tie together very slowly, one at a time, as you sort of stay in this process. And I think that has been for me the most fascinating part about journeying with Sangam and continuing to journey with it, definitely.
That's nice. That's nice. It's interesting, from your focus of an immersive journey, we actually jump to the next who were lined up. That is for both Sudarma and Vinita. They are both who came into Sangam pretty much very recently. They were introduced to this from the other side of the story. So let's hear their part of the story. So Sudarma, what was it when we actually requested you to be part of this festival? What did Sangam do to you?
Yeah, so namaskaram to all of you. Like we just heard Pratibha and Apurva talk about their journey with Sangam, and my journey has been very, very recent. And I must say it is one of the most fun journeys I've ever been on in terms of learning, or in terms of working with a new piece and everything, because there's so much to learn first, and there's so much that you can add to it. There's, like Apurva just said, there is no boundary to this exploration, right? There is no grammar. You have to create it all by yourself. I mean, you have the freedom to do that, which itself is amazing, and it kind of just feels so nice to have that space to create what you want. So when my experience with Sangam, with this poem especially, because this is my first, has been very, very very shaky. So when Aka first gave me a couple of choices, saying that these are not the ones that are picked, so you can choose from these. So I actually went through everything, every single one of them, and I heard Raghuram sir's detailed explanation of everything, and how he goes so much into depth of each poem. And then when I was hearing Nindra Solar of Raghuram sir's explanation, something, as he kept talking, I was able to visualize and have an imagery right in front of me. I'm just listening to him, but I'm having a scene in front of me that's happening like a movie. I'm having the visuals, I'm having the characters, I'm able to just feel it. So I was like, okay, if this poem with just a few lines of explanation can bring in so much imagery into my head, let's see what I can do to it. What more can I do? What more can I add? And that was my first, that was the only reason why I chose this. Everything is equally beautiful, and there's no reason to say no to something else. So I said, okay, fine, this, because I had this strong image in my head, I'm going to go for it. And that's how I picked it. And then with every time I hear the same recording of his, I have a new idea. I have a new perspective. And then I'm like, okay, now where do I start? Every time it's a different version of the same poem. And then I told Auntie that, I don't think I can do this in 1 month. I can't do this in 2 months. I need to sit with it. I probably need to see all the versions that I have and see what's the best I can give. That happened. And then, then there's been no looking back. I've just been working on multiple ideas, and I'm yet to come to one final version of my piece, which I hope I'll do very shortly. So
I think with you, Sudarma, it has been today's Nindra Solar. it's Nindra Solar of the day, like
Yeah,
a special
totally.
menu, like.
I must mention this. So I asked R.K. Sriram Kumarana to help me with the music. So the first time when I spoke to him, I just gave him the poem and I said, "This is my idea and this is the meaning that they've given me. So whatever you feel, you can start with it." 1 week later, I go back to him and be like, "No, that is not my idea now. This is my new version." And then he's like, "Sari, nee first decide pannu, unak edu venumnu. Then then only I can have a starting point." Then like 2-3 days later, after that, I call him back and I'm like, "Anna, no, it's not even that second one now. It's the third version." And then he's like, "Okay, I'll give you like 2 weeks time. You decide what you want to do and then you let me know." So even with the music, right? Like I've had so much, I mean, one, it's a privilege to have somebody like Sri Ramana like help because there's so much like musical input that he's able to give in terms of the poem, in terms of the context and everything, because he also understands everything so well. And uh, trying to bring what is in text and trying to bring the musical and the visual imagery that I have together is what I was saying is the most fun part of this whole
Yeah,
process.
that's so true. It's interesting that you're saying this because the abundant variety that just 4 lines can offer is so amazing. And actually, you're right, because that's exactly what made me feel that we can have both of you do exactly the same poetry back to back. Because I don't think we would plan it that way, right? If we all know that if there is a Shivaratri, everyone does Bo Shambho. And in fact, it comes to a point where we say no one is allowed to do Bo Shambho. But really, this one song had so much of possibilities that we were hoping that both Sudarma, and we will have both Sudarma and Vinita, and probably some more actually coming back to Nindra Solar. So tell me, Vinita, what is your story of Nindra Solar?
My stories again, it seems to be never ending, and I'm quite happy about it because I'm discovering new things. So why I chose Nindra Solar was very simple. It was because it had very few lines. To be honest, it had very few lines, and I thought, yes, I could do this pretty easily. And the theme was a little bit of a struggle for me because I'm now married for 18 years, and this theme is when a young and newly wed is so confident about her hero, and she's so strong. She believes strongly that he will not leave her and go. So for me, again, to get into that state of mind was a challenge. And then to create the story for how I used to think I could do it was I would have references. Like I have, like Deepa ma'am has already given us a lot of videos. So I thought I could take that as reference for, an idea for my choreography. And as well as I could tell my musician that, yeah, you can just refer this and, you can get it done. But one by one, when I started doing that, and I was telling the Panti, this is what I have in mind. So she asked me like so many questions. She asked me, why would the heroine do this when, etc., etc. So I was thinking that this is such a piece of cake. Okay, we've done so many padams, as Apurva was saying, we've done so many padams, we've done javlis. What's the big deal? But then each line, when I showed Deepanti, she was like, why would the heroine believe her friend, for example, and then that made me think. And another thing, what I found very interesting in the Sangam poetry is there are already similes in this. So there are already similes. Now, how do I go further? That was quite interesting for me because, like, one of the Kshetraya Padams that I've learned, Ninnu Juda, clearly the poet asks, it's been 4 or 5 months since you've gone. Why did you leave me and go? But here, the poet says that our love is like the sweet nectar that you get on top of the mountain. So I was thinking, how do I go beyond? And the poet says, just like how the earth becomes when there is no rain, my hero knows that I would really I would deteriorate if he's not there. So it's like the simile is already said. But for the padams that we do, sorry for that, yeah, for the padams we do, it's like the line would be there and we would be layering with different comparisons, different situations and different instances. So that's what I felt very challenging in Sangam. I was thinking, how do I go beyond? Because I feel the poet has already gone to a beautiful extent of, expressing the theme in terms of.
In fact, I think what you suggested, Vinita, we all go through it as, of course, for me as a child is a long time back, but yes, once I was also a child. But the point is, when we are children, we all have these rules. People say you can do, you can't do, and we think they are all very restrictive and it puts us within a box. But then we find our own ways of coming out of the box and we keep jumping out, and then we suddenly start flying. And then we finally realize it is actually those basic values that came in the initial years that gives us that sense of grounding to take off, right? And that is exactly what I could hear when you were speaking about the Sangam, because it looks like all the similes are already there and you just, are kind of saying, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, that. But no, if you start soaking in that, you just work on that and then you just take off. And it is a beautiful experience, definitely. And what do we have to hear from Meera? Because Meera is, unlike both Sudarma and Vinita, again, someone who has been sitting on text and technique for a very long time. It's very interesting because, like Apurva, Meera would never miss one single class. And she probably is one of those few people who was pregnant when we started Ojas Sangam. And now her little Tumbi is a wonderful, gorgeous baby. So in spite of all that, she would never miss a class. So Meera, what has this journey been for you, and especially this particular poem that you chose to perform?
First of all, namaskaram to all. Thank you, Akka, for having me here. I cannot say that I'm like Apurva Akka in the journey, because I'm still like, we say Kanni, as a like little baby in the case of Sangam, because when you asked me to take a poem, I was literally scared to jump into it, because I knew that with whatever I was listening, this is something really vast and I cannot just, take one and start working on it like any other padam. I'm not degrading other padams though. But yeah, it is completely different.
It's different, yeah.
Yeah. So that is why when you were asking me to take, I was like, yeah, I will do. I was telling that. But then when the classes were happening, this particular Natrine, it was something very spontaneous connection with it, because that poem really struck me, because that was some emotion which I almost, had forgotten. Because I grew up watching my father leaving the house and going for work, and then he is into merchant navy. So coming back, and I don't think he is so fond of it, really speaking of it. But then, I have seen my mother and father being away for so long, and so that emotion of a man, I always have this curiosity to work as a Nayaka than a Naika, because I find it very interesting to be in a man's character, in their perspective, and see what it is actually. So this is something which I've seen growing up, I've experienced growing up, but I never paid attention to it, unfortunately, till this poem. When I was going through this poem, I was literally in tears, because then I could imagine, my father going through all those things. So yeah, it is really, really close to my heart, this particular poem. And in working with it, it is, I think, what I'm able to sit today here because of their separation and the work they have done. So it is more like a dedication to them. So yeah.
That's very interesting, Meera, because what you said actually came back to the first point that Pratibha was saying, that, it is something very personal that even to this day, we can all relate to it. And to think that this is a poetry written 3,000 years old, it doesn't matter, because it's like as if someone saw your story and actually wrote that. And I think that's true of many of the Sangam poems that we have been learning, right? We can all personally respond to it, relate to it. And And that possibly is the strength of Sangam poetry, actually. In fact, that actually brings us to Anu, whose video was premiered today. Anu, do you want to share your story about this, actually? Because you have no clue of Tamil either, right? So for you, the language was completely new, not to say that people like Vinita or Meera knew. And I don't think even if you knew Tamil, you wouldn't know Sangam. But yet it was a little more difficult for Anu. So what was your journey, Anu?
So, namaskara to everyone. Like Deepika said, my spoken or mother tongue, so to speak, is Kannada. But to be honest, I mean, looking back now, a year since this all started, like Deepika said, I don't think it mattered. I will be very honest in saying that when Sangam, the specific Sangam classes were started, as opposed to the bigger Ojas picture, I took it on because there was so much already happening. Deepika had told me about it, and I really couldn't fit it in with what was going on at the time. And then I thought, this is very niche. They're talking about poetry. They're saying we will pick a poem, you can choreograph it. So it was as much of a direction that something could have. Otherwise, they were discussing Kambaramayanam and all sorts, and I didn't know where that was going. Here I said, okay, there's a starting point and there is an end point, and there is one poem that if we want to, we could choose. So to me, that gave a sense of direction, a sense of honing into one particular thing. But honestly, now in retrospect, I think Sangam as an experience has been the one thing that I took on without any expectations, without having to reach any deadlines, without having to do certain things for the sake of it. And I don't believe I'm saying this for those who know, I am the baby of this group. In the sense, I have only been dancing over the last 10 years. And like I said, with great difficulty, I can say I am 2 Margams old. Okay, if I really pull in everything that I've learned, I probably have 2 Margams to show. And so I thought, look, it's Tamil. Professor is fluent in Tamil. You are not going to be a regular on here. And you don't have as much of a basis of Bharatnatyam as is required for simple things, let alone something as complex as Sangam. Like, you have nothing to lose in this. Who knew? Who knew that the inexperience would be the biggest plus point? It did not matter, because then I realized nobody would understand this Tamil anyway. Then I realized, hey, wait a minute, there are certain things that are very applicable to what we see in daily life. And this is not in reference to the poem I chose, but generally when they were talking about love themes and things like that, I was like, this is our everyday Bollywood, maybe not as glamorized, but I can relate to first love because we've seen it in our movies. Citral happened again when I was actually tidying up my son's room. Citral happened. I was listening to a recording, and this was the smallest recording of Raghuraman sir's explanation of poetry, which was 35 minutes long. And when it came to the end, I had one question. What is it that made this poetess or this mother reply the way she did? This poor girl has just come asking, where is your son, or whatever. She didn't even ask, she's just looking for him. And the mother has to come up in all her, she's obviously a very feisty mother, that I related to. And I said, what could have happened before this incident that makes this mother say, my son, the tiger, has gone? And so the storytelling process started. And this has nothing to do with Sangam, isn't it? It just makes you think. And then I said, what happens after this? Maybe he gets married, maybe he goes out, and then what happens? So how does the mother evolve? And whilst seemingly it looks like it's all about the son and his bravery, to me what struck a chord was the mother's inherent bravery. And honest to God, and everybody here, they know that when I first wrote the English version. I wouldn't even call it a poem. I would just say my imagination in words. I didn't want it to be too wordy. And so I put it as a verse. That is really how it started. So in a simple language, it's called a poem, but I didn't start off with that. And I certainly didn't think this would be transformed into a Bharatanatyam piece with Carnatic background. No, no, no. That's all just too far-fetched for my imagination. So that's how it started. But what I want to say is, of course, I've learned so much. This has taken 9 months, and I keep joking that a baby could be made. And obviously, this is my third baby. The reason I say that is, yes, there is a dance to show, and I've done things, and there is a music. That's all. That is the physical manifestation of what has happened over the 9 months. Personally, today, as I sit here, I think it's more like a coming of age, first in Bharatanatyam for me, but equally, I've seen the effect this has had on other aspects of my everyday life. How do I respond to my kids? How do I respond at work? Where is that clarity of thought? Because that was honed in so much. Have a clarity of thought. What is your intent? And the second thing that came across through this process for me was self-belief. Because, after the initial thrill of being associated with Priyaka and thing, I can't even believe I'm calling her Priyaka, right? So after that settled, Priyaka made one statement that just put this where it had to be, because we were talking about poet's intent and this and that. And she said, well, this is your poem. So what's your intent? Suddenly, did it matter if it was Sangam? That change in perception. And whether that happens because we wrote it or because somebody explained it to us doesn't matter, because what it did to me was immediately bring that clarity of thought, take the clutter away and say, right, what is it that you want to say? And the reason that is important is not only has it, helped me with how I look at dance or how I would treat further pieces, but it's really brought in that clarity of thought in a more generic sense, even outside of dance. So I think it's work in progress on many different fronts.
I completely resonate with what you say, Anu, with the fact that Sangam poetry is a text which all of us seemingly respond to. Because even during this week, we have seen, dance groups, children, community responding to prompts rather spontaneously. We have had Divya Kasturi working with a group of, dance students at Lavan, and they have no clue of either Bharatanatyam or Sangam. At least you have two margams, but the point is not that. The content that Sangam works with is something beyond all these different layers, and it kind of elevates you to the very core of existence. And as you rightly use the word, it declutters our thinking to kind of focus on what is basic, and in many ways gives back our own voice, not just for others to listen, actually for us to listen to ourselves, kind of opens our inner core to ourselves in many ways, I guess. And the other thing that I can see just listening to all of you is every single one of you are from such varied experience and levels of, dance proficiency or training or practice and so on. It really doesn't matter. When you're working with something, you just go down, start from the basics, build up step by step. It doesn't matter how smart or how very experienced you are, you will have to respect what you're working with. When I hear someone like Meera telling that, I was so worried working with that, I'm quite sure all the different fans of Meera would find that little new, because obviously her beautiful dance that she did not reflect all that. So what is the focus here is the journey that one has to invest from that Meera to slowly declutter to come to what we saw last Sunday. And that journey, there's no shortcut. It doesn't matter whether you're experienced or otherwise, it is the hard way around. And in many such ways, what you really realize is this is just life skills. The fact that there are no, shortcuts, the fact that you need to listen to yourself, you need to declutter, it's just life skills. It really has little to do with text or art, but it just comes back to us, which is probably what anyway art and literature is meant to be doing. So it's very interesting that when we thought we were looking at something, in antiquity and, ancient, and kind of try to keep it in pedestal, but it just goes and come back straight to us, Pratibha, do you have anything to say, actually?
I want to ask something of the rest of the dancers. It's been a great journey, and I've been watching all of the videos. They've been superb. So we've been talking about, the impact of Sangam on our Bharatanatyam journey. But I want to turn the question over on its head and say, okay, from the point of a Bharatanatyam dancer, has this deepened your understanding or love of the Tamil language and Tamil literature? And this is especially for people who understand Tamil and for others too. So what is your language journey? Because we all wear many hats. And we're not just Bharatanatyam dancers alone. I mean, that might be some people's primary occupation and all that, but still, we still have to love language if you want to be a good dancer. So how has this deepened or widened your love for the language, or has brought about any kind of aha moments about the language or the literature itself?
Yes, Apurva?
That's actually a great thing to reflect on, Pratibha. Thanks for that question. I actually want to respond to it because, in my case, Tamil is my mother tongue, and my it's not necessarily dance that brought me to, Sangam in the first place. So my relationship with the language comes from a different place already, and I think appreciation of the language comes from there. But what I think dance has done to me is, and I'm also looking at this now from a different perspective of a language that is not mine, right? I think it really compels you in a nice way to engage with language in a deeper way than we would if we were readers of the poem. I think definitely, because one of the things that we struggle with while working with a language that is not a native tongue to us is understanding flavor, right? And I find this challenge always while trying to translate a Tamil word into English. So many times I just fail, and there is a point where I say, okay, there can be no other word for this. This is what it is, right? So definitely, I think that has been for me like very interesting, because the way I read poetry in Tamil is one thing, but when you reapproach it through dance, I think it takes you so many steps closer. And I can definitely say that based on all sort of language explorations that you go through. Yeah.
Nice. Anu?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that in the sense, on a wider scale or a bigger picture, I have actually learned the power of words. So if you look at the Citral, let's come back to a narrower base, which is the Citral poem, which is actually 5 lines long. And the words that stood out for me were 3. So really, it was the pillar, the womb, and then the tiger's cub, right? And what didn't fit is the fact that the poetess said, my womb, which was like the mountain cave. And of course, yes, my poem is not a transliteration. It is more an extrapolation of what the Citral poem is about. But I just could not get why they would refer to a cold, bereft place like a mountain when the womb is actually warm and protective. And one night when I was talking to my husband, who really, unflatteringly so, or I thought, had no artistic incline. And I said, of all the things, why did she say mountain cave? And he said, that's because it protects you from the elements. I was, how could I, Between the two of us, I call myself creative. And the penny dropping moment happened because you were so fixated on, oh, this is how you need to show it, and this is what the mother is about, and this is what the tiger is about, that you forgot that she referred to her womb as something that protects you from the elements. And suddenly it changed my perspective of the poem. It was no longer about the tiger. It was about the mother and her womb. But that was Citral specific. But what I've also realized and was very aware of when I wrote the poem was fewer words, which then translated to my sessions with Priyaka, where she said fewer hands, which then translated into don't write down sentences, write down words. So less is more. And going to Pratibha's question of how it has turned around my perception of language, I do think a lot more in English than I would in Kannada even. But having said that, this has made me want to speak and express myself more in Kannada. Not that I can't, but English comes naturally to me. And I have, very funnily, because of Priyaka's insistence on lesser hands, I've actually, taken it into my work life as well, where I say, because I'm a surgeon in training, so it reflects on economy in movement, which reduces your time during the procedure. So from your perception of how you could use lesser words, it's gone down to how can I cook quicker? How can I operate quicker? How can I get things done quicker? So I think in a very, it's very nice. You can obviously express yourself in a page, but it is nicer to explain yourself in a paragraph and lesser. So that's my turnaround with what language and Sangam have done.
Nice. Makes us more efficient and makes life a lot more simpler. Again, declutters, as we all have seen through this entire project. So is there anything else that anyone would like to share or add or respond to? Because it looks like if the purpose of art is to make us better human beings, well, this exercise has definitely done its job well. Well, it has started our journey. Hopefully, we will be continuing in making ourselves better every step. But is there anything else that any of you would like to share? Or
I must say that, for a long time, I have had this almost angst that if you think about Bharatanatyam songs, and again, I'm known for my unpopular opinions, so I'm sure this is going to be an unpopular opinion. But Bharatanatyam songs are generally more simplistic in terms of their poetic elements, generally. Because we tend to do compositions that are based in 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. And I've always had this, with the exception of maybe Divya Prabandhams and, Tevarams and all of that. And I've always wondered, this is such a treasure trove. I mean, it has so many layers. When you compare Sangam literature to any of the 19th century compositions, come on, there's no comparison. And I've always felt like, people should do Bharatanatyam to this. We need to dance to this, because this is a great way of expressing ourselves, of paying homage to our ancestry. And they're so beautiful, so off the people, so secular, and it's about nature and human relationships and all of that. And I've had this angst, and I'm so glad that things are opening up now. I mean, there are so many resources available as well, thanks to a lot of scholars, and it's been wonderful watching people delve into this treasure trove of Sangam. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Deepaka.
No, I think in many ways, I think that's the note that we will probably sit on till we come back to Sangam again after a few months, probably after December season. And the note would be is just to be open and to listen, because we never know the treasure which is so close to us, and we might yet miss it just because we are busy with something else. There are many, many beautiful moments, beautiful people, beautiful emotions just around us. And it's just about being a little more sensitive and aware and sitting on the moment and enjoying it. So I think if no one else has anything more to say, we can call it a wrap for the moment with Ojas Sangam Festival Part 2. Yeah. So thank you very much. And thanks especially to all of you for being part of this, and hope to continue our journey even further. Thank you.